Welcome back to Hotelier Helpcast, where independent hotel owners stop surviving and start running calmer, smarter hotels. Hi, I'm Jerry McPherson, and if you've ever found yourself staring at a bank balance and worrying about rising costs, wondering where the cash went this month, or lying awake at 3 a.m. thinking about payroll, taxes, or occupancy, today's special episode is for you. Running an independent hospitality property can be incredibly rewarding, but let's be honest, it can also be stressful. Between staffing challenges, utility costs, supplier invoices, tax obligations, maintenance expenses, and the consistent pressure to fill rooms, it's easy to miss the warning signs that financial pressure may be building behind the scenes. My guest today is Jonathan Cooper, Managing Director and the founder of Directors Helpline. Jonathan has spent more than 17 years helping business owners navigate financial challenges, restructuring, business recovery, and practical decision making during difficult times. Jonathan, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
No problem. Are you ready to jump into this?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, I want to learn a little bit about you. What got you into the restructuring and business recovery business?
So I sort of fell into that. Historically, my background was lending to businesses, and in the crash of 2008, a lot of my work came from accountants and introducers as such, and commercial finance was probably the first thing to be hit. And suddenly overnight, a lot of the businesses that we'd helped fund were needing debt advice essentially, because almost overnight that they became insolvent. So I was then fielding a lot of businesses that I'd helped get finance for with help with how to deal with their debts. So over time that became more and more prominent, and I feel like I could probably make more of a difference with helping these businesses. And yeah, that's how I entered the debt market. My journey since then was I spent about 10 years at a large insolvency firm, sort of head of corporate insolvency, and about 10 years ago I exited that and set up the Directors Helpline, which is the first of its kind in this marketplace, was certainly the largest of its kind. And what I mean by that is insolvency and debt is unlike any other industry in the UK and pretty much worldwide, to be fair. What I mean by that is the business owner has two hats on. They have their hat on as a director and their duties that come with being a director, but they've also got their hat on as a business owner who have a personal investment into the business. And a business and a company are two very separate things. And what became very apparent in the insolvency market is, as a director, you have a duty. If you are running a company that becomes financially distressed, your duty is to take advice. And you would do that historically through your accountant or through an insolvency practitioner. And whilst that's fantastic, and I did that for a long time, the insolvency practitioner's main role is to advise the director in their capacity as a director only, not as an individual. And as such, if they then have to go through a process or a restructuring, the insolvency practitioner's main job is to actually represent the creditors of the company, i.e. HMRC and you know your trade creditors, the banks, etc. And they then have a load of statutory duties to perform, whether it's selling the assets, investigating the directors, and all manner of things. And it's a very formal, regulated room. And that's fine. But what was very apparent is there is no support for the director as an individual. And they go into this, you engage someone to, in essence, represent someone else, which is unlike most historic sort of engagements. You engage a lawyer to represent you, whereas in insolvency, you engage an insolvency practitioner to give you advice as a director, but then represent your creditors.
Oh, yeah,
and
okay.
Where there was a huge need is obviously, and we'll come on to COVID, I'm sure, in a bit, but 99% of directors don't set out to fail. They're business owners, they have a dream, they're passionate about hospitality or whatever it might be. That's their business, that's their trade. They then have a limited company to facilitate that because, yeah, it's the most tax efficient way and all these things. But they're thrusted into this world that is probably alien to them. And there is absolutely no support out there to say, right, this is what you do. This is the manual of how to run a company. This is what happens if you get into trouble running a company. You learn on the job, and usually the hard way. And most things, when businesses are doing well, the money's coming through the door, you can pretty much solve. But then something like COVID comes along that no one could predict. No one could even sort of assess what it was. It's unlike anything in a generation that stops everything. And hospitality, was first to stop. You're then thrust into a world, well, what do I do? And how do I deal with this creditor? How do I pay my staff? And what eventually then happens is certain things beyond the business owner's control get them into a situation where the company might fail. It's not a slur on the business or means it's a bad business, but they're thrust into this world that actually they've got to do something. And emotion plays a big part because their natural instinct is to survive. And out there in the corporate world, there is zero support. So you're sort of left to your own devices. Well, I've got this tax debt that was accumulated because of COVID. I'm going to go and get a loan. I'll ring a finance broker. But a finance broker is going to sell you a loan. An insolvency practitioner is going to talk insolvency. And there's all these things out there in the corporate world that you sort of inadvertently have to make the decision based on zero understanding or maybe what's right for you and what could be the consequences. And that's where the Directors Helpline came in, because 99% of most insolvencies can be avoided if they'd had the right support. Because insolvency does not happen overnight. It's a series of events and decisions that bring the company or whatever it might be to a situation of no return. And what I mean by that is, for instance, COVID comes along and hotels, whoever, businesses, their thrust almost stopped overnight. A lot of the times, did they have the right accountant who could then say, right, okay, no one could predict how long COVID is going to be, but have you got the right finance in place? Have you got the right forecasting in place? How are we prepared for all these sort of eventualities? And 9 times out of 10, they're not. Because, when you look at the accountancy world, yes, there is some fantastic accountants, but it's usually a reactive industry rather than a proactive. Accountants, they do your accounts that are essentially out of date. Very few do up-to-date cash flow models. What's the forecasting? And feed that information to the director. And there is a massive shift, because when you speak to a director or a business owner, and I keep calling them business owners, because let's take a hotelier, okay? Their business is hotels, right? They know their customer, they know front of house, they know how the kitchen should work and the cash flow and everything. But actually running the company is quite a difficult thing to do if you don't have the right support or the right finance in place. And they usually have that through default, right? I've got an accountant, he's local, or I've been given this in name, etc. So people almost fall into it, especially if they go on a growth path. And what happens, if something goes wrong in the business, what support is there for the director or the business owner to help them? And I use this analogy a lot and I say to business owners, it's not your job to understand tax, VAT, accounts, dividends, corporation tax, cash flow forecast. That's not your job. Your job is a business owner and a shareholder. It's their job to educate you in a language that you understand to make decisions.
Right.
And I keep saying that it's you who engages the accountant. But as it's quite old-fashioned, where the corporate finance world and funding and banks and everything in the business world, it's almost like left with the director to try and figure it out themselves. And that's what's the unfair advantage, where in the consumer world, we're spoilt by technology to help us make decisions. So I can say, right, I want to go to a hotel. Right, let's go. What's the best hotels? The best for families, best for this. Technology will facilitate me to help me make an informed decision of something I know nothing about. Mm-hmm. There is nothing there in the corporate world or the business world that helps them with absolute clarity and impartiality. And that's what the Directors Helpline was. We are funded totally through our panel, because we're made up of a panel across multiple sectors of insolvency, law, accountancy, funding, insurance, across the 2 sister sites, the Helpline and the Director's Choice. And it allows me then to go to market, to directors to not only offer something totally free, because we're funded by subscriptions, and so it makes no
Wow.
difference to me. It makes no difference to me what the director does, because we're paid either way. So it allows me to go to market totally for free, but more importantly, have no commercial interest to the outcome. So I say to directors, my job's not to tell you what to do. My job is to articulate each option in a way that you understand it to make a decision. Because if you've come to the helpline, in a perfect world, you wouldn't be here, but you've obviously got an issue. And that issue could be, I've got a tax debt. Right, well, we know why that's come about. We know why the company's in this situation. But what are our options? Do we carry on? And what are the pros and cons and risks of doing that? Do we go and get a loan? And what are the pros and cons of doing that? Do we restructure? There's no right or wrong route. There's just different routes with different pros and cons. And as long as the director knows that getting financed, they're going to need security, they're exposing themselves on personal guarantees, as long as they're happy with that, we're there to support them and get the right funder to the right person. And there is such a need to be that platform where we deal with the corporate world. We've got multiple different sectors of people I've known and trusted over many years, and we can then put the right funder, the right accountant to the right client. And if you think from a model perspective, it's what the director needs. They need just that focal point, as in, find me this, okay, the right person for me. But in the corporate world, it's music to their ears, because we have, for instance, accountants that just specialise in hospitality, okay? That's what they do. Now, get that accountant to that hotelier over there is quite a hard work, because they'd have to go on Google, paid search, and that cost of acquisition to try and find that client and vice versa is a massive gulf. And that's where we come in. So we would say to the client, right, you're based in Glasgow in Scotland. Okay, you turn over £1 million, you've got 2 hotels. Okay, well, we've got 3 accountants. They're based in the Scottish area, Edinburgh, Glasgow. They're similar size firm to you. They specialise in hospitality. I'm sure you'll get on. He's a good guy, and we'll put you two together. And the beauty from the director's perspective is if this accountant doesn't perform, he'll be off the panel. The beauty from the accountant's perspective is he's just paid us a subscription to be part of that panel. And I found him his perfect client. And that is why it's so simple, in my view, and why if you got that right and you support directors in everything you do, whether it's getting the right EPOS system for their payments, that's a minefield in itself, or the right insurance, the right leasing for their vans, or etc., and the right support, then 9 times out of 10, when problems happen, you've got the people around you to not ever go into a position where you'll end up insolvent. So the idea is to prevent insolvencies, not create insolvencies.
Do you find that I deal with a lot of smaller properties? Do you find that smaller properties often hide their financial stress? They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to bring it out into the light because they're embarrassed or nervous, or, like you said, where to go.
100%. Part of all our social campaigns and things like this is to raise awareness. They're not adverse. I don't like the word adverse. You don't sell insolvency. You don't sell debt. You are either insolvent or you're not. You either need help or you don't. So we're very clear that we're not a sales team. We don't sort of try and, let's get an insolvency in. It makes no difference to us what the director does. But there's 2 things you'll always hear in the outside world. Number 1 is the longer you leave it, the worse it gets. It's almost like going to the doctor. Certainly as the males, we hold it off until the pain's so bad that I'm going to have to speak and reach out to someone. But once I've reached out to someone, 9 times out of 10 I feel better. And what I say to directors is the reason you've got worry and stress is because there's not a plan. You're not in control, there's not a plan in place. And as bad as it might seem, it is only debt, okay? It's not dealing with life-threatening cancers and stuff like that and your health.
Yes.
It is only debt. It can be solved, okay? It's just getting control of that situation and having that plan. And there is nothing I haven't seen. We speak to well over 1,000 directors a month now, and they're all the same, okay? The same sort of demographic. You've got obviously the older generation who are very, sort of set in their ways, and I'm going to deal with this and take it on almost as a personal failure and stuff. And then you've got sort of the younger generation who've just got zero support out there. So, there's a lot to be said about, reaching out. And I know it's hard, but that's why we have multiple routes to us, whether it's people who just want to communicate on WhatsApp, Facebook, call us, email us. We're 24/7. I'll give you an example that a couple of years ago, over the Christmas holidays, personally, I take all the messages, and we had someone ring and they diverted to my phone on Christmas Day, right? And it was about 2:00, and my wife went crazy. It's like, why are you taking a call? And I spoke to the director, who was clearly in a bad state, and he was that stressed that he couldn't even acknowledge or think it was Christmas Day. But that was then just about, right, let's just reassure, let's do this, do this, do this. And I just almost, you're not going to jail. They thought, I'm going to jail, I've got a VAT problem. So it's like when you're potentially ill, I'm just trying to put this into a similar thing that people might relate to. When you're ill and you go on Google, and then you think, oh my God, I've got bowel cancer or something like that, where actually the reality of it, it's not. But my imagination and my fear plays heavily more than the actual reality of the situation. We find directors who obviously see these things as failure. But the other analogy I use is how many times you learn on the job, you learn through failure, okay? And when you do restructure, okay, when I speak to businesses, the first thing I ask them is, what do you want to do? And they're like, what do you mean? It's like, what do you want to do? If you're sat here saying you've got no work, or you're a hotel and you've lost all your customers, 9 out of 10, the business is okay. It's the company that's not, okay? It's the company that's taken a battering because of the reasons we've gone through.
I couldn't have said that better myself. Yes.
Yeah.
You're so.
But the business, I've got bookings, great. But I've gone through the worst 5 years of that I can remember, whether it's COVID, no one talks about Brexit, and then the cost of living, the war in Ukraine, now the war, in Iraq, all these things, the governments, the multiple unstableness of the economy, and hospitality is one of the first things that get hit, coupled with the fact that we've then got a new government that then basically rips up the old tax regime and then puts new things in place. So it's one thing after another, and then you still got these businesses, going straight forward into the storm, and they're still taking deals, taking customers in. So when I'm sat there with someone and I'm like, actually, restructure, you didn't choose to be in this position, but you are in it. And we either restructure this to save the business. What you will find is out of that, everything becomes clearer because we get them the right accountant, we get the right financing in place for the new company. So the business actually continues because that's the viable thing. But actually just going through a new entity means that's the best way to save all the jobs and everything, and they actually make profit. And when I speak to directors and the whole thing is, I've not paid myself, it's almost like a badge of honour. And I'm like, why? Because you should be the first person who gets paid. So you sort of take this crusade that you're the one to take the hit of something that was beyond your control usually, that it then is my job in a way to protect that director. Because the amount of people I see that have these huge overdrafts and these loans that are personally guaranteed, and it's just, all they do is expose themselves. You have this element of failure. And I always say, being a business owner, sort of an owner-managed business, let's say. So I'm not talking your huge companies with big boards. I'm talking your hotelier or your pub owner. It's an owner-managed business. He's a publican or he's a hotelier and he runs a company. The owner-managed business person has it the hardest, okay, in every walk of life. Because when you mention stress and mental illness and stuff like that, you can't necessarily just go home and say to your partner, this is happening, because 9 out of 10, it's not a problem. It's the stress of running a business. It's the stress of having all the staff and making payroll. They're relying on you to do that, to feed their families. You can't necessarily just go back, because it's usually a complex situation with tax and HMRC, just to go home and explain that to someone who's not in the business or who doesn't understand.
Right.
It's a very, very lonely place being a director. And one of the things I'm passionate about is ripping it up, this status quo of the corporate landscape, who realistically all scrap amongst themselves. You go to a lawyer, the first thing he's going to send you is an engagement letter and his fee notes. You go to an accountant, they're going to do it. And someone actually needs to fly in a flag for the business owner and the directors to give them some protection and, more importantly, support. We'll monetize our business through the corporate world, and by what we do, because they need us. They absolutely need us. We're speaking to 1,000 people a month that, right, okay, you need an accountant, and I've given that hotelier the best accountant in the Northwest because they specialise and they love them to bits. This accountant needs us, and they all need us to do that. And that's why, over time, as long as we can spread the awareness and where we get recognised, no one does what we do. No one does what we do. Because,
That's amazing.
and it's been born out of my experience of insolvency and seeing that these directors who have gone bust, who have lost their livelihoods and everything, actually have been avoided if 9 months ago they'd had a better accountant or better advice. And it then leads on to obviously HMRC, who are by far the most aggressive creditor. Their stance has changed dramatically since COVID. Dramatically. And,
Really?
you know, the reason why is because when you ring HMRC, you know, about
For those
VAT
not from the
or
UK, what is HRMC?
Sorry, HMRC is His Majesty's Revenue and Customs. So it's the tax
Got
office. So tax, VAT, PAYE, corporation tax, you know, is usually the largest, if not the biggest creditors of certainly hospitality, because VAT, you know, obviously is paid quarterly, and PAYE essentially on a monthly basis for the staff. And hospitality by its nature usually employs lots of staff.
Yep.
And turnovers, and they obviously have that on everything. And when COVID happened, there was just almost a bit of a timeout. Okay, COVID was supposed to last for 3 months. It lasted 2 years, in essence. We had multiple lockdowns. We then had multiple reopenings. Even to the sense of when we did the Eat Out to Help Out schemes, you know, when it was a table of 6, you know, I think that was August 21 or August 20, where you could sort of go out. Even the cost to the hospitality industry to make everything compliant for that to happen, to separate the desks, the covers, and, you know, all these things take a toll on what is already stretched business model.
Yeah.
And in that time, when you've got an owner-managed business, that they structure themselves on salary and dividends, okay, the only thing out there to help them was COVID loans, okay, which were great, bounce back loans, C-bills and everything. And whilst that was welcomed, the fact of the matter is it's debt. It's debt that sits on a balance sheet that has to be repaid, okay? And not only that, your income has stopped. So they'll give you the time, they'll give it over 10 years, it's only 2.5%, everything's great, we'll furlough the staff. So there was a bit of things that are absolutely great. But as a director, I still need to pay my mortgage. So I still need to take my dividends. So technically I'm taking illegal dividends, okay, if I've not got reserves there. And that's another conversation. But I didn't do it through intent. I did it for survival because I need to pay my mortgage and feed my kids. And I was structured on that because my accountant put me on that. So when you look at the sort of the COVID times, as things essentially opened up, what then happened is with changes of government and economic policies and, you know, things like that, tax is like, well, we need this money back. And so then there's this generic shift of, right, we need the VAT, we need the PAYE. And a lot of these businesses aren't even recovered from COVID. You know, they're still paying the debt. And now they've got to service the debt that they took on through already stretched business model. And cash flow comes into its own because it's like, well, now I've got all these overheads that are effectively coming out of my profit, which was almost pretty slim in the first place. So you can see why these things happen. And the trouble with HMRC is when you ring them, first and foremost, you're not speaking to a business owner. Okay, the person on the other end of the phone has never run a business. They've never paid staff. They've never had that pressures. They don't understand that thing. They are there to collect tax. Okay, they are not a commercial entity. They're not a lender. They're not a funder. They are there to collect tax on behalf of the taxpayer, and they'll have a remit. And that remit is you need to pay it within that timescale, and that's what I can approve. And if you don't, we're going to take action. And as they're not a commercial entity, they don't think twice about taking action. So that's why they become the most aggressive with winding up petitions and all sorts. And all that does to a business owner is puts them in a corner because I've got no choice. I'm going to have to pay you, and I'm going to rob Peter to pay Paul. So I won't pay my supplier just to pay the VAT. I will take out a short interest loan just to pay the VAT that I'm going to be personally guaranteed against. And the problem with that is that's a short-term fix, but a longer-term problem, because I've now got to service that loan and I've just exposed myself. So where I get annoyed is when I see these things that the government have to sort of articulate every penny they spend of the taxpayers' money. What they don't have to report is the amount that's written off through companies going down insolvency. You know, the millions and millions of tax debt that just gets written off because HMRC just put a winding up order in.
Yeah.
Rather than having a commercial look at it, there's a difference between a client that can't pay and a difference between a client that won't pay. Okay, tax avoiders, dodgers, all that, I get it. Okay, go on. But there generally is businesses out there that have inadvertently got into situations of cash reserves and problems, and it's like, you know, they're paying the staff, they're paying this, but if revenue then saying, well, we're going to want it or we'll wind it up, that's not helping anybody, because all you're going to do is put a load of people out of work and then put another person on the system that then has to draw social security. So again, that's what the frustrating thing is if you actually had someone with a bit more of a commerciality about it, then we might not only collect more taxpayers' money in and not have to write it off, but it'd actually be better for the business owner. And the real thing that niggles me is when you look at government policies and the budgets that come in, you know, hospitality is a driver of employment, it's a driver for tax, it's a driver for communities, okay? Massively, it helps mental health, you know, going to your pub and going to, you know, hotel for something to eat and everything. And cost of living, you know, people have to be competitive to allow people to go there. And the fact that they have VAT and not curbed when they dropped it to 5% during the times, how they've not left it there is scandalous, because VAT in hospitality is almost harder than anything, because you've got to pay your staff, your wages, your overheads, but you've got to pay the top rate of VAT on your income. So there was an exercise done where in reality it's more than 20%. It's more like 40% in terms of when you look at the cost of that to the business. So you look at certain industries, hospitality, construction and other things that you need. And I read the other day, 2 pubs a day are closing. And it's like, there's no incentive anymore. There's no incentive to be a business owner. You know, you've got all the risk. You haven't even got the incentives of drawing the income without having to pay extortionate dividend tax and other things. So what is the incentive for someone, a passionate young chef, setting up his own little restaurant or setting up a hotel? What is their incentive? And that's what I love about the British public, because their incentive is, that's them, that's their passion. And what I'm passionate about is not that being taken advantage of in a system through lack of support. So if there is a way that I can get the right legal advice to the client for a fair price and the right person and get them their right client, then I'm going to do it. And actually the ethos of that is the more we do in the right way and the more we support directors in the right way with no commercial interest in their outcome, then the more insolvencies, there'll be less insolvencies, because people will have the right support around them as and when something happens in the business.
Wow, are you planning on expanding to overseas, to North America? Because you could definitely move over there.
Because, and these are the things that, you know, when I set out to do this, I set it out in a way that it was through frustration. You know, I didn't come from a corporate world. And I'd say this to any of my panel, but, you know, you take the sort of route of an accountant. You know, they usually go to school, go to university, get a degree, go and work at experience in one of the big 4 or 5, gain their exams, they do that, they become an accountant. Great, brilliant. They're academics, and a lot of them.
Right.
But they've never run a business. They've never gone out at 16, set it up. Right, how do I deal with this? That's the difference between an entrepreneur and the corporate world.
Right.
And our difference is we're that conduit between them. Because I'm a business owner. I've had businesses that have worked and not worked, and all these different ideas that have come to light. But this was totally born out of the director needs this. And that's why I launched Trustpilot. Because you'd have thought, doing what we do, talking debt, talking this, you know, no one's going to want to, it's embarrassing. On the contrary, you actually help someone out of the situation they're in. They want to shout about you. And that's why over time we've got up to like 600-700 Trustpilot reviews across different platforms, because directors will listen to directors. Because I'm saying to them, as a business owner, you don't have to trust me, okay? Don't trust me. Trust the other directors exactly like you. Trust these forums where people speak about us. You know, research us. Look who we are. You know, we were listed on gov.uk as one of the places that, you know, we did a lot of work with them, along with the
nice.
FSB and the Institute of Directors. The directors to actually go and take guidance from, because we're actually genuinely in it for the right reasons. And if you do that, the money will come, because you can monetize our business through the corporate world. So solicitors pay us, you know, accountants pay us, insolvency, you know, they all subscribe. And that panel is not only as an invite only, but it's also very heavily monitored, because if people aren't giving the service to the directors that we're flying a flag for, they'd be off it. So their level of service actually goes up than if someone had just actually their accountant direct.
Oh,
You know,
fantastic.
I say to hoteliers, I say to business owners, when was the last time your accountant emailed you after 9 o'clock? You know, or you had a question at 10, could you text him? I bet it's within, you know,
Minuscule?
small percentage. Right? Why? Why? You know, find an accountant that will text you at 9. Find an accountant that will answer your question after 10 at night. Find an accountant who explain the best way for you to structure your taxes in what's right for you. And when I say to people, certainly out of restructure, has anyone sat down with you and said, what's your 5-year plan? They're like, what are you talking about? You're living day to day, right? Day to day, a business owner.
Yes, yeah.
But as a business owner, one of the good things is you've got a bit of freedom. And it's like, what's your 5-year plan as a hotelier? Is it to expand? Is it 5 hotels? Is it to, you know, get as much money out of it so you can pay your mortgage off? Is it to pass it on to your children? Is it to sell the business? What is your aspirations? Because if you don't have that, how can you work a plan? And they might say, listen, I want to sell this business in 5 years' time and retire. Right, that's our 5-year plan, yeah? Well, between now and then, how much do you need a month to take out? Well, I need $3,000 a month. Right, just keep it at that. Let's keep the profits in the business. Let's put certain amounts into a pension, and let's keep the profit levels up, because that then will make it a much more attractive aspect as and when we go to sell it in 4 years' time. And that's what I say to people. It's not hard. And at the end of the month, all I need to know is my 3 numbers. You know, what did I do in sales? What were my costs? And what were my profits? And am I still on my plan? And if I know them, that's all I need to know. I don't need to know what my VAT was. I don't need to know what corporation tax percentage I'm paying, because it's none of my business. All I know is my accountant looks after that. But as long as those 3 numbers are on track, I'm on track.
Do me a favor.
If it wasn't for 1 month, right, why? What's happened to sales? What I'm doing is immediately, through that information, reacting on it, rather than waiting until the problem becomes an issue. And that's what it's about.
Do me a favor. Repeat the 3 numbers that they should be looking at, because this is so.
It's bespoke to every business and every person. But you know, I think in a hotel, pub, hospitality world, you know, one of the key numbers is what your takings. Yeah. Okay. And then what the costs, what the bottom line, because obviously as turnover goes up, sometimes then costs go up. You know, you might need more staff and stuff like that. You know, and realistically, what is my net profit over the quarter? Okay, and you'd have a number in mind, because, and this is after everything. This is reserves. This is after wages. You know, and again, dependent on directors and how they're structured, they might actually want to say, do you know what? I'll have a set wage. Yes, I pay more tax and national insurance on day one, but realistically, it safeguards me, because I don't want, if I go into a dip, or I've got seasonality in my business where in the winter months, you know, turnover goes down for whatever reason, then I need to make sure that I'm taking something which is the cost of the business. And if there's dividends at the end of the year, I can then decide whether I distribute them out as a shareholder or I reinvest them, or I put them in a pension, whatever. You know, again, no one thinks like that, because they're all thinking in the day-to-day.
Exactly, yeah.
And that is sometimes the difference between being on it and in it. And when you mentioned before, you know, plans to go, yeah, I have, because we're looking at Australia, we're looking at Canada. They have exactly the same insolvency laws. And again, probably the same pinch points of issues that the UK has. The only difference with the UK is COVID hit hard here really, really hard. And with the bounce back loan schemes and other things and the way taxes and the way the government is, I think the pressures are, very, very real time. People, you can see businesses, they fall over very, very quickly. They're very fragile, a lot of businesses. Whereas the likes of things like Australia, the tax office is a little bit different in the terms of they'll support you a little bit better, and there's different pinch points and there's different pressures because there's obviously a lot of mining over there and stuff like that. So every country has its own issues and pros and cons, but fundamentally the ethos and the model is the same. You've got corporate, you've got solicitors, accountants, IPs, you've got lenders, they're all out there. And what is there out there to actually be a totally free platform, pre-post, however much you want to use us? And I wrote 3 words down here because it's one of the things that when businesses are like, well, what should I do now? And I said, you listen, you talk, and you follow. And they're the 3 words that I always say to people, as in, follow us on socials, okay? Because I will do videos. I won't do long things about an hour talking about tax. No one wants to hear that, and I don't want to talk about it. But I'll do very short snippets of might resonate with your situation. Certainly in hospitality, the VAT.
Right on, okay.
VAT will be one of the biggest issues of cash flow. And cash flow is king, as you always hear. And, when you look at what finance is out there, getting the right finance for your business is so incredibly important because the natural reaction is you go to the banks. But the banks, they'll just give you an overdraft, but they want security. So it's like, do you enter in? Is that the right thing to do? What other finance is out there? There's so many lenders and there's so many different products that you're never going to know them all, certainly as a business owner, and you could do as much research as you want, and even AI will probably confuse you a lot because unless you live and breathe that market, you're not going to know. So you then go out to find a broker. But the broker's incentivized to sell you finance. That's how they get paid.
Right, exactly.
So what you need is options. Right, listen to this video. This is a video on EPOS schemes and what it costs for card payments, American Express, and so on. And these are the comparisons of it. This is a video, and this is solely based on HMRC and which taxes are the most important and relevant. Because corporation tax is treated very differently to VAT, for instance, and PAYE. And what do you do if you get a situation where you're not going to be able to pay it? What's the best action? Well, you communicate. So you could do those videos, which we do. So we always say follow our socials, whether to interact with us or not. The second thing is listen to the people around you. Surround yourself by good people. Challenge everything in your business, right? Who is my accountant? How much am I paying my accountant? Right? What do they do for me? Do they speak in a language? Are they easy to approach? Are they not? If not, you come to us and we'll find you an accountant that is absolutely suited. And you'll be like a breath of fresh air. That changes a business overnight, having the right accountant, okay? Or the right legal advice or HR advice based on a bad employee or whatever it might be. So listen to the people around you. Surround yourself by good people. But on the flip side of that, on their defence, good advice costs. So if I said to a director, what's your relationship with your accountant? Oh, it's rubbish. I don't speak to them. They're dreadful. Okay, how much do you pay them? £100 a month. What do you expect for £100 a month?
Exactly, yeah.
So if I said to you, right, let's pay them 500 quid a month, but actually they'll make you 30 grand more in profit and do that, would you do it? Yeah, of course you would. So you've got to invest just as much as they've got to invest in you. And I would say to someone like this guy's hospitality, and we've got someone specifically on our panel who was an ex-chef, right? And he did his accountancy exams, this is years ago, and he's now an accountant and he deals with hospitality clients. But he knows things that I wouldn't know, like this is the best thing to do on bin collections, on your waste disposal, because it's a tax benefit, we do it like that. I'm like, wow, a normal accountant wouldn't know that. Because he specialises in hospitality, he knows he masters his craft, he knows everything about it. And you get all that with a hospitality client, they dance, they make absolute sense. It's like brilliant, and that business transforms overnight. But that's 500 quid a month, or whatever it might be. But it's the best 500 quid you'll ever spend, if then that prevents certain things from happening again. You save fortunes in a year in, tax write-offs and stuff like that. So listen to the people around you. And the third word is talk. And you mentioned before, head in the sand, stuff like that. We launched a mental health program free of charge on our site, because when directors speak to me, I see everything. I've seen marriages ruined. We've had people who have gone seriously mentally ill and done some awful things to themselves and tried to take lives and all sorts of things. I've seen it all. I've seen houses lost a lot. And when I speak to them and I eventually get hold of them, I send our teams and say, right, I can sort that. Easy, done. Right? And I'll deal with the IP, I'll deal with HMRC, I'll deal with all that. But you need to take care of yourself. So we have a panel of mental health experts who say, go and speak to them, because nothing's more important than your health. And we now live in a world, thankfully, where it's a bit more the status quo of talking. We encourage men to talk, and that's why we have multiple inlets to communicate with us. Some people do not want to pick up the phone. Not a problem. Text me. If you want to WhatsApp me at 10 o'clock at night with your problem, I will have a WhatsApp conversation all day long with you. Not an issue.
Wow.
But
okay.
you do, because and as you expand and as you get bigger, and you become awareness, yes, you have to have certain things that help you, technology and stuff. But fundamentally, all my staff are on one sort of a WhatsApp application that we get someone in, and dependent on the tone of the WhatsApp, we're dependent on the response, right? Okay, and I'd speak to anybody at any time, and that's the difference, because you didn't set out to fail, right? And usually you're in a situation through no fault of your own, so you should almost stop beating yourself up, where you're going to do yourself a disservice if you do nothing about it, because unless you pick up the phone, unless you talk. Even if it was talking for a problem that's not a problem, that's what we're here for. There is nothing we can't help with, and there's nothing that I've not heard. So if it's someone rings up saying, I'm worried about the tax, I've not filed my confirmation statement, right, fine. Don't worry, this is how you rectify it, and it will help you if you need help rectify it. Done, problem solved. And it's having that knowledge that totally differentiates us from, I hate to say, your charities and your business deadlines, because we're underpinned. I've been in the insolvency industry a long time. The guys upstairs who Directors Choice, they've worked for banks, they've worked for funders, they've worked for all. We are honed in with the knowledge, but we're now on the directors and the business owner side of the desk. And it's refreshing, it's gratifying, but talk and reach out. And that's where, if you follow the socials and you listen to certain things that we do, I want it to be a thing that you're on our side. And that's why our sort of phrase is, we're on your side, in your corner, because that's what we do. We want to be part of their journey for the success, and if it obviously needs a help, and we should be on their side all the way through their business life.
So most of the businesses you help are in the UK, but I think it would be worth it for somebody in Nova Scotia, Canada, Arizona, USA, or even Germany to check out your social media sites.
Massively, because
from what I understand, they'd all benefit from it.
Yeah, I think business is a business, isn't it? Everyone's just had different pressure points, but fundamentally the people are the same. You've got a sort of demographic of hoteliers and hospitality, but there is plans to expand, because what I found in the last 10 years of doing this is, when we first did it, we were a disruptor. We massively disrupt the corporate world.
I imagine, yeah.
They didn't like it because we work under a non-regulated banner, essentially, but they're regulated. But I was like, why not? Why don't directors deserve it? Insolvency was usually filtered through the accountant, and the accountant puts it through to their insolvency practitioner that they've got a relationship. That's great, but every insolvency practitioner is different. You've got different sizes of them. So what's right for him or her, and what funder's right for them? So there is huge plans to branch out, and like I said, Australia being one of them, and potentially Canada and other things, because the concept's the same and the need is the same. And I always find that the corporate world, or the business world should I call it, is always about 10 years behind the consumer world. It is. Yeah. Again, we've got technology absolutely everywhere, but fundamentally, if I've got a tax problem with HMRC, there's no technology that's going to help me how to solve it. I can get AI and I can pull things from the web of certain things, but unless I understand it, how am I going to deal with it? And that's where we need to break down the walls to say, we're not here to charge you money. We never charge you money. There's people who replicate us. We will never ask you for money. We are on your side of the desk, and we are there as almost like a fellowship, that we are just there to tap in as much or as little as you want to. But the more you get out of us, the less chance you're going to have of going insolvent or getting a problem that we can't solve. Because like any problems in life, health, anything, the sooner you catch it, the sooner you deal with it, the easier it is to deal with. Whereas if you leave it manifesting, that problem grows, and then sometimes it gets to a position where you can't deal with it. So that are the three things I really emphasise, along with our culture values, which is, our first culture value is to be approachable. Is take down the barriers of debt. Approach us. We should be a normal chat. Hi, Directors Helpline. You're just part of my course of running a business. The second one, to be 100% director focus. It is all for the director. The third one is to be absolutely transparent in everything we do. I'll show you how our business model works. We can show you why we don't charge you money. But the fourth, which is probably the biggest, is to add value. We are there to add value to a director or a business owner who runs the business, which is, again, a lonely place. And if we can do that, then my job's done in my way, because insolvencies will improve.
I'm going to put you on the spot. If you could give owners one piece of advice for the next 12 months, what would it be? Maybe to stop them from spiraling into a position where they need you right now.
Reach out.
Yeah?
Reach out. Again, I've seen, without going into too much detail, we had a business that came to us this week, been trading since 1997. The director's 86 years old. It's not in hospitality, it's in a totally different sector. And due to one disgruntled customer, the lender who manages their stock got spooked and uplifted all the stock and sold it at auction. So they took about 6 million quid of stock, sold it for about 4.5 million, and they were only in for 4. So there's a £500,000 surplus. Overnight his business is gone. And the walls came in like that. That happened in 10 days. It's startling how things can be so reliant and so sort of based on other people's decisions. And it's wrong in a way. And when they come like that, and your sort of options are tied, it's very difficult for me, because when I speak to directors who have personally guaranteed and put their house on the market and everything for all the business debt, I'm like, how have you even got to that stage? And it's usually because I've rang up finance broker, and the finance broker's not sort of said, do you really need this loan? Why do you need this loan? They just said, this is what you can have. And a director's natural instinct is to survive, and emotionally they're invested. And my job is to take that emotion out and be very matter of fact, because you have to be, like a doctor has to be. They have to take the emotion out, because that's the way they help you. So the only thing I would say, whether you are flying high or under the cosh, is reach out on our socials, because I want to speak to people that say, listen, I'm looking to sell my business. Great. Well, do I get an investor? Do I do crowdfunding? Do I do all these different routes? They all have different pros and cons. Well, speak to a couple of our panel. They'll do it for free, and they'll give you some advice. Just if anything come out of it, we've added value for you. And it's stuff like that I want to expand my business. Well, what do? Do I borrow money? Do I crowdfund? Do I get an investor, an equity investor? Do I get an overdraft? All these different things have pros and cons if they don't work and if they do work. So it's about educating them on those different options, not patronising, but educating them on what they mean, so the director can go, right, I've got it. That's the route for me. So I always say reach out with socials and stuff like that. That's probably over the next 12 months, because even I don't know what's happening. You turn on the news and something else is...
True.
We live in that world, don't we?
Wow, this has been so much to take in. Is there anything else you might want to share that you might not have mentioned yet to the listener?
I think, what I do say to directors is, I can overload them with information. My job isn't to go into the technicalities of how things work. When I first speak to them, my job is to give them an understanding of high-level options on a basis that which ones do we explore. And once we explore ones, we then go into it. So I would, from a thing to cover, we've covered obviously a lot today.
Yeah.
I'd like to get feedback. We're always trying to pioneer different ways to interact with business owners, and do we do podcasts, do we do Q&As, do we do all these different things. We try to do surveys all the time with directors to find out what do they need. What do you want as a business owner, as a hotelier based in wherever? What frustrations do you have? And you'll probably find an underlying message, which is they feel probably quite on their own. Lack of support, lack of clarity. And what I would say to them is good advice is out there. There is accountants out there that would be absolutely so perfect for you. There's a funder that would work seamlessly with your business, that would be really cost effective. There is insurance policies that would cover everything for low cost. Challenge absolutely every aspect of your business. And as a business owner, take back that control, that they all work for you, not the other way around. When your accountant sends you sets of accounts, you just say, well, you explain to me. It's not your job to understand a set of accounts. It's their job to explain it. And management accounts and stuff like that. So all these things there's a certain aspect of, because they talk a different language and they're all, it's an accountant, there's acceptance that you've got to take what they say to you as, well, that's it. And I've got to understand it, and I feel stupid asking the question.
Yeah.
Your accountant should speak your language, because your accountant couldn't do what you do. And I think that's the one thing, is take back that sort of control and the onus.
Boy, that's something I don't see often enough. You're so dead on. That alone is amazing advice. You've given us so much to think about now, and I hope people take advantage and do reach out to you. What's the best way to find you, to find out more about your work and you?
We're very big on social media, Directors Helpline. We've also got the Director's Choice. We do YouTube videos. I think Facebook's a very good one. It's a good way of communicating through the outside world. Again, we're not there to lecture or talk about boring subjects. We're there to just relate to people with a view of giving them little bits of understanding to then feel a bit more empowered by their situation. So social media by far is our best sort of touch point, and obviously you can do that from wherever in the world. Following that, it's very easy to interact with us. So if they want certain, can you do videos on this? Can you do that? I'd happily do videos on that.
Excellent.
We do try, obviously, push down the media channels, but going through the sort of normal routes of TV news and stuff like that, it's quite a hard wall to break down, because it's taken an hour, and hopefully you feel, right, I get what you do, I see the value of what you guys do. It's very hard to push that message out there. But then obviously when COVID comes along and something happens in the business world, then, there's massive focus. Why are business owners? But even then, they'll go to the likes of KPMG and these top things of why are businesses doing that. The UK, in my view, is made up of the SME. It's the small to middle enterprise. It's the business owner. Yes. That's the backbone. It's the hotels, it's the hospitality, it's the pubs, it's the constructions, it's the business owner, in my view. When you get into the big PLCs, yes, they have much more influence in what happens worldwide, but fundamentally they don't fall overnight. The businesses that are fragile, where something like COVID comes along to hospitality, it decimates an industry, almost like that. And the ones that are still here, that have effectively survived, is a credit to the business. Because the fact that they survived the last 5 years means that their business is obviously phenomenal in terms of a model, but it might also mean that it's taken so much water on that the company is inherently troubled because of all the issues they've taken on. That's the time you reach out, because my job is to say, if we can get that business in an entity, in a way, in a model that it's going to thrive again and lose the last 5 years of pain, then that's a better success story than doing and carry on until someone will probably make the decision for you, namely revenue and customs or a bank.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, I'm going to get all the links from you and I'll include them in the show notes.
Brilliant.
So it'll be easier for people to reach out. Hey, Jonathan, thank you. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. Even for me, this has given me a lot to think about. So I really appreciate you taking the time and being so generous.
Pleasure. No, look, I've enjoyed it. I obviously like talking about helping directors, so...
You're obviously passionate about it.
I do it every day, so yeah, hope that comes across. Really appreciate your time and having me on, and anything you need, reach out and we'll provide.
Super. Thanks.
Thanks, Sherry.
One of the biggest takeaways from this conversation was that financial difficulties rarely appear overnight. More often, they develop gradually through small warning signs that are easily overlooked when you're busy running a hotel day to day. The good news is that recognizing those signs early can give you options, and options create opportunities to regain control. If you're listening today and some of the issues we've discussed sound familiar, remember that seeking advice early is a sign of good leadership, not weakness. The sooner you understand what is happening in your business, the more choices you have available. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe to Hotelier Helpcast. Leave a review and share this episode with other owners who could benefit from the conversation. Until next time, remember, successful hospitality properties aren't built by working harder every day. They're built by creating better systems, making smarter decisions, and staying focused on what matters most. I'm Jerry McPherson, and this has been Hotelier Helpcast. Take care, and I'll see you next time.